Welcome to the Find and Follow podcast, where we are all about helping you find and follow Jesus in everyday life. I'm Scott Langhand, your host, and joined by Craig and Kyle, the co-host, and a special guest. So if you're tuning in today, we are going to help you discover what it really means to have freedom in Jesus. If you ever find yourself just kind of getting caught up in, am I doing it right? Am I following all the rules and regulations? You kind of feel like following Jesus is a little bit burdensome or heavy. I think you tuned into the right episode today, because we're going to be talking about that as we're discovering what it means to follow Jesus in light of the book of Galatians, or the letter that Paul wrote. But today we've got a special guest that's going to join in on the conversation. Todd Peterson, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Todd is a Mission Church friend, and you've been a regular listener, and we've been talking about you coming on the podcast for quite a while, and here we are.
Isn't it true you're president of the Find and Follow podcast fan club?
No.
No, because
I will admit I listened to the bad one, and I listened to the last one twice.
really,
Oh, wow.
Because I thought, I got to remember everything that you guys were talking about.
a lot of pressure when you're coming on the
A lot of
podcast.
pressure. Yeah.
Well, before we push
Well, you are a
record,
super fan, though.
I do.
We do appreciate
I'm
it.
a mailman, so I listen to it at work.
There you go.
Oh.
So I
yeah.
cheat.
So you're out and about delivering, and you get to listen to quite a few things.
I do. I listen to podcasts. I listen to books. I listen to music.
Yeah.
So it's really boring when you're just flipping through mail.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your service.
Do you
right?
ever get into the podcast so much that you deliver mail to the wrong address? Ever make a mistake?
I
because
never delivered to the wrong address.
Ever.
Yeah,
Never
yeah,
could.
Craig.
Yeah.
Come on now. What is going on? We have a guest here.
Oh, I
Let's
just was wondering how into our podcast he was.
Yeah.
I
He can
do-
be-
there is a 15-second backwards button,
Oh, there you go.
but there's also a 15-second forward button.
Roger that.
Which one do you use most?
The back. The back.
I do that all the time too. Like I just zoned out for the last.
I just
what did
zoned-
they
yes.
talk? What did they just talk
What did
about?
they just say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is good for me a lot of times, because it'll stir up some thinking or
Yep.
something. So then my brain will wander on that,
Yep.
something that I'm trying to apply to my life.
Exactly.
But then I'll wonder, did I miss other good things when
Yes.
I'm listening to things? But sometimes I'm driving. Okay, so I'm driving, I'm listening to a podcast, and then I use this journal notebook, and then I'm like, I got to capture that thought.
Yeah.
So I will sometimes be trying to write,
Oh,
no. real sketchy
No.
writing.
Never
Or-
admit that.
What?
Never admit that.
I just did. It's fine. I don't care.
I've got some State Patrol trooper friends.
Yes.
Yeah. Because
Anyways.
I normally have my notes open, like when I'm listening to a
Yeah.
podcast, my notes. So I'm constantly, and sometimes I won't pause it or something, right? And then I'm writing, and I'm like, I got to go back again. Which is nice. Like the Audible app, when you add a note, and then you can add a clip, and then you can add a note to that clip. It automatically pauses it for you when you write the note. So it's like, this clip is about this.
That's
I want to go back
handy.
and listen to this,
would
and it
work.
pauses it, and then you're done with your note, and then you can go forward.
I
If
get
I-
so used to the pause and rewind function with television
Oh, yes.
that when I'm listening to the radio in the truck and I miss something,
Yes.
it's
You're
like, I reach
rewind-
for the radio.
Yes.
It's like, where's the rewind? Oh, I don't have one.
That's no good. I do the, hey,
You do?
Siri, send me an email at home or at work, and then she's like, what's your subject? And I will just, say what I'm thinking. And because I'm just like, I'll remember that later. I'll remember that in 12 minutes when I get to my destination. Like, I don't. Nope. So sometimes you just got to capture these thoughts. Sometimes I'm like, is this true type thing? Or maybe I'm working on a message, and like, I just got this thought while I'm driving, just hits you. And I'm like, I gotta get that down on paper. But Todd, we're glad you're here. We appreciate your mail service. I think that's one of the most underappreciated services of our everyday life. And you probably feel this more than anybody, but most people just complain about it.
Yes.
There's not a lot of thanks for doing it. Great, 99% of the time. But can I complain about the one day the mail got the wrong slot, or
Yes.
I was supposed to get the package on Tuesday, it's Wednesday, and where is it?
Yeah.
We underappreciate. So on behalf of all of America, thanks for delivering.
It is. I actually get about 50-50.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And it's interesting, the days that I have bad days and the days that are horrible, and I'm like, God, this is just horrible. This day is just terrible. Please just show me something. And all of a sudden I'll have 8 people in a row. And it's like, wow, okay. Okay, that's a pretty clear sign. That's a pretty clear sign.
Yeah. Yes.
And then there's other days where it's just dead.
Do you have a motor route or a walking route?
I am on a motor route. I drive. But I have a lot of apartments. So
So you get out on those? Do you have like a central mailbox for those?
Yes, 148, and the other one is about 200 and something.
Wow.
That's the old folks' home.
Wow. So, like a driving route, how long does the actual driving part take? 'Cause you got all the like prep and the sort and load your truck.
Yeah,
and
mine is
unload.
about 6.5 hours of driving.
Oh wow.
So, on a average day,
How many miles does that cover?
11.
That's a long time to cover 11 miles.
Yep.
Well, you
I'm
heard
just
all those
thinking-
numbers of boxes.
Oh,
200,
yeah.
100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It
Do you have one of those cars where you drive on the wrong side?
yes.
Well, yeah,
Nice.
everybody does,
And
right?
I
it is
know.
and it is fun.
I bet
was
it is
gonna
fun.
say,
It is
I would
fun.
love to drive one of those.
It's really
Can I
weird.
drive your mail truck or mail
No.
car?
What's
I'm
one of
sorry.
the craziest encounters you've had in a mail delivery situation?
Well, there's always the little old lady in the nightgown.
Okay.
Almost everybody gets that one. And then there's the crazy people
But
who
like the nightgown, I mean, we don't want to get the
just
explicit.
just a nightgown.
just a nightgown. Just too much. And
Just-
she's just unaware?
Yeah, and then,
She's just
or they
old
don't
and
care.
Just don't care.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then there's the guy in his boxers.
Okay.
We always get those. And then animals, dogs, cats, birds.
Have you been attacked?
Yes, multiple times.
Really?
Do you
Ever
attack
been
back?
bitten?
What's
Yes,
the
I have a
protocol there?
spray.
Did you spray?
I've sprayed 2 dogs total. I hate spraying dogs, but when they're inches away from you trying to bite you, you have to spray them.
Right.
So
Wow.
That's just self-defense.
that's yes.
Ever been attacked by a person?
Yes.
Wow.
Verbally and finger pointing in my face. Yes.
Jeez.
See, that's
That's
why,
where you go, have a nice day, sir. I'll be calling my supervisor in 2 minutes.
right?
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Move along.
Once again, thank you for all that you do.
Yeah.
We can't say thank you enough to make up for some of the jerks out there.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting so used to all the deliveries now, USPS doing and Amazon Sunday specials, and then, all the other companies that are delivering on a regular basis to a lot of our homes. And this last year during COVID, where it's a lot of online shopping and delivering, and we just expect, and demand, and are frustrated when it's late or not the right thing. And
Yes.
so I think it's good for all of us just to thank our delivery drivers, thank the
Yeah.
people that are in service to us each and every day.
Absolutely. With evolving technology and changing delivery systems in our culture, what do you think the future of the U.S. Postal Service might be?
Hopefully Amazon takes their packages back. They're working on it, and that would really take us from. We're way above Christmas volume for the last 2 years. Way above Christmas volume for the
Wow.
last 2 years, and we're running out of people. We're literally running out of people. So if you want to work at a job and get paid good, and work, apply to the post office. You'll be instantly hired. I almost guarantee it. So.
Yeah. So I think more than talk. I mean, this is awesome and intriguing, but more than I don't
Yes.
think we had you on the podcast totally cover the delivery
no,
stuff.
yeah.
But it is. I'm super fascinated by the whole logistics of delivery. I know it's weird and kind of nerdy, but I'm like, the efficiency of routes and the timing. If I was a delivery guy, I would have a hard time not to time every single day and know my averages. And
So you'd be a good supervisor.
I hit this stoplight at 11:24. If it's 11:26, I know I'm running.
Yep.
that. That's just how my brain would work every day. I
Wow.
just can't turn it off. Yeah, it's
No,
kind of
it happens.
I
It happens.
bet.
Scott.
It's
It
kinda
does.
weird.
The same thing over. Yeah, I
The
I
same
get
thing
that, yeah.
over and over and over. Yeah.
yeah. I love a lot of metrics. I mean, that's part of why I do triathlon and have all the stats and data. Anyways, it's weird to live in my head. I know that, but we love having guests on because we love to hear people's stories of how they found Jesus. And everybody's story is important and valuable and life change. And so it speaks to listeners. It connects with people and their stories. And so, how did you find Jesus?
I was one of the boring ones, and I say that because it was really early. I was 6 or 7 years old, and I was in VBS, and it was out in Valley Ford. That's where I grew up. Was out in Valley Ford. I went to Freeman, and there was the little old ladies in VBS. I say little old ladies. They were probably in their 30s, but they were little old ladies.
Little old
I had
ladies.
visions of like 80-year-olds. You know,
Some of them might have been 60 or 70, but most of them were probably in their 30s and 40s, but they were little old ladies. And they just had an open invitation, and I'm like, you know what? I want that. So I took that and made it mine. And then I was always the good kid, but nobody ever knew that I was the good kid because everybody thought I was the bad kid, including my mother.
yeah. What was your parents? Did they have a relationship with Jesus? And
Yes.
is that part of?
Yes,
story?
from early age. Both my parents were Christians. We all went to Valley Ford Community Church out in Valley Ford.
So elaborate on this. They thought you were bad, but you were really good. Even your mother thought that?
Yes, my mother always thought that I was the bad boy, the kid who always got in trouble. Like I was telling Scott, I said I was the one with the loud mouth. So if I was talking in class, I got in trouble, even if I was helping somebody. I got in trouble when I was in grade school because I was ducking somebody who was throwing rocks at me. That was just the epitome. Somebody was throwing rocks at me, and I was ducking, and I got in trouble.
Do you feel like you were targeted? There was a conspiracy to get you.
Maybe. I never did get a spanking at the school. However, I did get spankings at home, and I eventually told my mother, I said, you did not spank me enough as a child. I actually told her that.
What?
Yes.
But she thought you were the bad kid.
She did, but see, I was a good manipulator, and I could manipulate my dad. Sorry, Dad. I could manipulate
Are they going
my
to listen
dad
in and
totally.
find out some new information?
Oh no,
here?
they know.
Okay,
they
all
know.
right.
They know. But I was always the good kid. I was never the go drag you out to church. I'm going to make you become a Christian. You're going to come with me. But everybody knew I was a Christian. Everybody knew where I went to school. Everybody knew we had Teen Jam. We went to Teen Jam every year. I don't know if you guys remember that. And I had friends. We had a really good core of friends in our school. And we hung out a lot, but we weren't always in the same class. But everybody knew who we were. Everybody knew what we stood for. I think I was offered drugs twice in high school. Alcohol all the time. I mean, it was everywhere. But I
Right.
never drank. But I went to parties. I'd go to the parties, and I'd be the sober one. I'd help people go back home. I'd make sure people weren't totally stupid, because you can't stop all stupidity. So,
Yeah, stupid's not illegal, so.
no, stupid's not illegal. But, and then
So how did you think that worked in your relationship with Christ as far as growing up and that kind of, upbringing and background and like, okay, I'm good, but not really bad, but then kind of in between and all that?
Here's the thing. Like I said, I wasn't the guy who would drag people to church, but I was always the one, if you had a question, and me and Jackie are the same way. In school, everybody would come to us because we had that solid foundation. We didn't have the questions that the other kids had because we already had 90% of the answers just by having Jesus and living the way he wanted us to live, or at least trying to live the way he wanted us to live. I mean, I'm not perfect. I mean, ask my wife. Ask my parents, ask my sisters, especially ask my sisters. They know I'm not perfect, but I tried to be as good as I could possibly be, at the time.
That's good. I have a vivid memory of sitting at my house, and I don't know if we had cell phones at the time. I was in high school, and there was like a raging party. I grew up in Liberty Lake, so it was just across town. I mean, so it was really close. And my buddy called me up. He's like, "Hey man, can I come over? I'm at this party. Everybody's just plastered. I mean, he's like, I'm literally going to take this dude's car, and he doesn't even know I'm taking it. I just need to get out of here." And he came, and I'm like, "Dude, why are you here?" He's like, "I don't know, but I know you got Jesus, and I didn't want to be there, and so I'm just coming to your house." I was like, I can picture sitting across we were in my basement just talking, and he's like, "My girlfriend broke up with me, and I don't know why I'm at this party, and everybody's drunk, and I wanted to get drunk, but now I'm not getting drunk, and I just thought I'd come over here." And I had this conversation with, and then I drove him back to the party because his car, he drove there with someone, so he needed to go back to the party. And I remember driving back to the party, and everyone's drunk. "Hey, what's up, man? Hey, buddy." That kind of.
You guys both had very different upbringings than I did.
You were the guy at the party that was
I was
drunk.
the guy throwing the party.
Yes, and supplying the party.
Oh my gosh.
And leveraging the party for his own benefit.
Exactly.
That guy.
And everybody thought I was bad.
Yeah.
Because
were
you,
bad.
because you were doing great things. You were not going, how can I bring up the standard of morality and doing good in the world? But that's the beautiful thing of Christ. He changes all of us, whether it's
Yeah.
at 6 or 16 or 66, that life transformation.
Yep.
Because Jesus is attractive. And we all know it instinctively in our hearts. So even if you're in middle school or high school and you're like, I don't know, I can't articulate the reason why I'm calling you, or I've got a question and it seems like I should ask you, Todd, and as your friends and people are talking, but it's Jesus in us that is attractive to people, and it's the Spirit of God at work through us. This last Sunday, I was speaking, and I get done and just talking about how love always wins and the power of God at work in our lives. And to love others like Jesus loves us. And then there's this young lady who's at the back of our family room, which is what we call our main gathering room. And she goes, hey, were you just the guy talking? And I don't recognize her, don't know her. And she goes, I just wanted to talk to you. Okay, all right. So her name's Rebecca. She's 20. She grew up LDS and broke away, she said, because she went to college the first year and just partied. So she went from this real, like we've been talking about in Galatians, real legalistic way to kind of be right in, not kind of, but be right in life, which doesn't lead to Christ or to life.
It's just religion.
Yeah, it's just a man-made system to, work people over, basically. And so she's in her own words, I broke away from that. I partied. Now I think I've found spirituality. She lives in Boise. She just happened to be in Spokane visiting a friend. And she was on a run, and she ran by our building, and she felt compelled by the Spirit to come in and stop in. She had no clue, no idea. So she's standing there in her running attire, like holding her earbuds, going, I don't know. And she popped in the last 15 or 20 minutes of the message, but she's just like, I'm supposed to come in here. And we just talked for about 10 minutes. I introduced her to some people and just pointed her to Jesus. Because she's just struggling with unwinding from law and, a life that leads to death to, okay, who's Jesus and how does this work? Her questions were centered around, well, when I do bad things, how do you get out of that? Or if you're feeling like you're doing really good, how do you not feel like it's you doing all of the work? But I was just like, this divine encounter, and what is that? Well, that's just Jesus at work. That literally people running by would be drawn in by the Spirit and go, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing here, but I feel like I'm supposed to be here. And so we chatted, and then she left and continued to run, And it was just a cool interaction where God's at work, drawing people to Himself, and to be available to, hey, all right, God, who do you got for me today? Strangers that are running by? Sure. I'll just point them to
Scott, to your
Jesus.
point about Jesus drawing people to Himself, He's for sure doing that. The Spirit of God is working all over the world, drawing everyone to Himself. And He also says this. He says, none of us come to Him except that we are drawn by Him. We talk about finding Jesus, and we've addressed this on the podcast before, that it's really Him finding us as much as it is us finding Him. I mean, we do find a relationship with Him, and so that's not wrong. But sometimes we overlook the fact that the desire to even know Him, the prompting, the drawing, the wooing, that's all God. That's His Spirit at work in all of us. And so, when I finally came to Christ, it was because the Holy Spirit was really, getting my attention and drawing me to Him.
And I bet you there was people in your life who were praying for you.
For sure, absolutely. And I identified some of them after the fact. Yeah,
we were talking earlier of how me and Jackie pray every morning. It's like, okay, you need to wake this country up. You need to get this country back where you want it, God, because we're messing it up. We're messing it up big time. I mean, you talk about the small voice that she had. Sometimes it is so loud you can't ignore it. Sometimes it's so quiet you can barely hear it. But you need to listen to it because it's God talking. But like you've said in the podcast before, you need to make sure that voice you hear is from here, is from people that you know. Can you double check it? Make sure that my inner voice that I think is God. Double check it with the Bible. Double check it with people who you trust.
Yeah. Just because it's a familiar thought that's running through our head doesn't make it true. we need to check it against what is actually true.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what this young lady was trying to do. She didn't know.
She was talking to some dude randomly, like, are you that guy? You must know something. You were the guy up there.
Yeah, and that's the reason we were talking.
Yeah.
But she didn't know what the voice was in her that was saying you should stop in and why you should stop in.
Yep.
She just felt compelled. And as a runner, I get it. She's like, I stopped. I don't stop when I run, is what she's saying. I'm like, I get you. Like, why would you stop? That's called going to the park or a picnic. Like, that's not a run.
We're not running.
So she stopped, but she couldn't shake it. She just knew, but she still was wondering in our conversation, is that God? Is that spirituality? And I could tell, and I said to her, I said, sounds like you're really looking for the approval of other people to know if you're doing life right. Tell me if that's true. And so, I mean, I'm just kind of guessing a little bit with her story, but she's like, yeah, I think she just is trying to unwind from what she grew up with. And she's going, that's not life. That's not leading to life. I'm breaking away from that. I swung over to the party land. Now I'm coming back to like what is true. And so I just pointed her to Jesus. I said, get the YouVersion Bible app on your phone. She was running with her phone. She downloaded that. I said, there is a great 15-day plan called Following Jesus. It'll just walk you through. That's all I know how to do. It took me a while, too. I figured out she was from out of town. I thought she lived in Spokane. I was like, well, tune in online. Like, just trying to point people to Jesus, because then you'll know the truth that's inside of you. You hear God's voice speaking to you. Check it against God's word, others that are Christ followers. We all need each other for those reasons.
So, Todd, back to your story. So, at an early age, you're responding at a VBS because the little old ladies presented Jesus to you.
Who don't have just nightgowns on.
Nope.
That's the other
They
part
have
of
got
the story.
dressed for the day.
I went
are
there too.
dressed
When he said little old lady, I was like, wait, your previous little old lady
Little
story.
ladies, no, these are the ones that have dressed for the day appropriately.
Yes,
Not some of his male customers. So, and then you talked about high school and being offered drugs and alcohol and how you navigated that. Did you ever have any time in your life where you wandered away from Jesus?
Sporadically. I would get dull, to say. I would get ho-hum, but I never truly walked away from God. I'm not quite a pessimist, but I'm close.
Sounds too pessimistic to say.
Yes, yes. I can never deny God or Jesus because of what he's done in my life, ever. But I don't want to do that today. I don't want to do that just today. But then it kicks in, no, it's real, it's true. I need to work on this. Now, don't take me wrong. I'm not saying I have to work for it. But just like in a marriage, if you don't put the work into a marriage, that marriage is going to fall apart, period. If you don't want to do the work for the marriage, it's going to fall apart.
All relationships are
All
like
relationships are that way.
that, including with God.
Including with God. And it's like, yeah, I can't physically see him, but I can still talk to him. I can still listen to him. I can still study his word. I can still talk to the people that are inside of my Christian influence that I trust. I can still do all those things to make my relationship with him better. Probably my deepest, darkest time was I worked at a brick plant for 21 years. And for 21 years, it was deep and dark.
Really?
Yes.
Literally.
Literally. That was probably my lowest point. Probably about 10, 15 years into that, I really got, I would say, borderline depressed because it was not a good situation. Constant swearing. I'd never swore hardly at all in my entire life until I hit like 30. And then at the brick plant after 15, 20 years and everybody's swearing around me constantly, it got into my mouth. And I'm like, oh. And I've been struggling with it ever since. I hate it. But it's something that I have to do daily. I can't do this. I can't do this. I need to switch those words with good words. So that's probably the closest I've ever come to rebelling. I don't know about. I don't know if that was rebelling, but
Just having some apathy, it sounds like.
Yes.
Just kind of like, which is almost, it's real tricky. It's kind of one of those things of the enemy, because I experienced it in my own life, where you're like, oh, I'm neutral. I'm just kind of neutral.
Yeah, there is no
There's
neutral.
no neutral.
There is
You're
no
either
neutral.
going forward or you're going back.
Yeah, so he
Yes.
tricks us, oh, you're not like going against God because you're kind of neutral, but like even almost a positive neutral.
Yes.
Have all this stuff that rolls around in our heads and hearts, and like,
Yeah.
no, that's not true. Like, we're on fire or we're not.
Yes.
You know, Todd, you talked about your experience there at the brick plant, and it reminds me of the fact that the people that we hang around with, the people that either by choice or in your case of necessity that we are around all the time, they have an influence on us. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul talks about the resurrection and how important it is and central to our faith, foundational to our faith. And then he makes an interesting statement in the middle of all that, because there were people that the Corinthian believers were hanging around and listening to that said, no, the resurrection's not real. And you shouldn't believe what Paul is saying to you, what he's taught you. And then he makes this statement. He says, bad company corrupts good morals.
Yes.
And he just reminds us that if we hang around people that dismiss the resurrection, that dismiss the things that are near and dear to us, that are foundational to our faith, that's going to have an effect on us. We kid ourselves if we don't think that we're going to be vulnerable or susceptible to that over time. And I think it's just a good reminder that who we choose to spend our time with is an important decision.
And I think there's the tension there is because the extreme has been taken where then people say, oh, yeah, don't hang around, quote unquote, any bad people. And people have gone to the far extreme of that and go, oh, you can't hang around anybody who's like of the world and the live, like groups of people, right, have taken their whole lifestyle and separated them from the rest of the world and said, oh, we're going to just hang around ourselves. Where yet Jesus says, go into the whole world and preach the good news. Well, who are you going to preach to? Quote unquote, these bad people, people that need Christ. So the tension of like, well, we should hang around some people that are far from God. And how does this work? So who's influencing who? Is it always like all the bad people always influence? Like, well, no, the spirit in me is greater than the spirit in the world. So at what point is the influence going the other way, where the spirit of Christ is influencing them? And how does that work?
Yeah, look at what Jesus did. He was always with those people. He was always going to those people. He's always going after the Samaritan woman. He's always going after the wayward son. But who did Jesus have around him? He still had his 12 around him. He still had his 3 or 4 super close. Then Jesus would take his time, go away from them, go away from everybody, and have his quiet time with God. He always did that. I don't know if you guys have ever noticed that, but that was his pattern. He would recharge with God, come back with his friends, go get people. Come back with his friends, go back to God, get back with his people, go get the other people. He didn't just stay with the bad people, because he would have, well, I shouldn't say that. He probably wouldn't have. We would.
Yes.
We would be influenced by those other people, not our 12 or our 3 or your specific time with God.
Yes.
And that's an interesting pattern that I see that he did all through scriptures. All through scriptures.
And if we could use that as a segue, kind of to maybe jump into a little bit, this was happening in Galatia.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's really Paul's argument for these first few chapters is like, that's what you're saying, is that everybody has to look like us and behave like us, and those are the only people we surround ourselves with, because those are the good people, and those other people are bad people. Don't associate with them. Or if you are going to associate with them, they have to look like us and act like us, and then they'll be allowed to associate with us. So there's this disconnect between Paul going, wait a minute, no, I'm going to them to influence them. I'm not going to be influenced by them, because I have a strength in my identity and who I am in Jesus and what he's doing, but I'm going to influence them. I'm going to set the tone, and I'm going to set the temperature of the conversation and the attitude, and I can do that. And I can go, hey, no, I'm not about that, because that's unhealthy for me. But you know what's healthy is this, and so there is a tension to be managed there.
Yeah, because Peter in chapter 2 here, Peter and Paul have a dispute because I think of this very issue that we're talking about of who's influencing who, and
Is it whom? Who's influencing whom?
Is it whom?
That just sounds right.
Whom's influencing whom's?
Who is influencing whom?
Who's-
Right, Craig?
Sure.
I don't know.
Craig's pretty top-notch on the grammar.
Sounds smarter than who.
I have no idea when to use whom.
Me neither, but that sounds like a case that I'm guessing. You not going to help me out here?
No,
You
I'm
know
just
the
gonna-
answer.
I'm just going to let you.
You know
keep
the
on
He's
answer,
gonna
digging.
let
though.
you flounder.
I know.
And he's like,
I think it's whom.
learn on your own.
I would
bud.
never say that because I don't know.
Anyways,
but
I'm not okay. Back to the point I was trying to make about life in Jesus. Peter's showing up. Peter is Jesus, close guy, like Todd, you were saying, like walked with Christ, knows Christ, what was a Jew, became a Jesus follower, recognized the holiness and the value of the law in Judaism, but knew it was for a season, knew it pointed to Christ. So when Jesus shows up, great, the old is gone, the new is here, I'm following Christ. And so he's all in on that. And then certain men came from James, so like James's followers, James's friends, who are Jewish people. James, the brother of Jesus, right? Am I gathering this?
Yeah, and rewind to just kind of your definition to help. Even in verse 9, he talks about these people as pillars of the church.
Yeah.
These guys are like, again, I think we talked about this in one of the last episodes. Like, these are the guys that everybody knows as the early followers of Jesus who are somebodies in the church. Like, these are the
leaders.
Yeah, and once
they're influencers.
And once James, the brother of Jesus, recognized Jesus as Jesus, because he denied him at first, right? Because again, who's going to believe their brother's the Messiah of the world?
No.
I'm not. You're not. You're not.
Definitely not.
Well, my brothers are definitely
Todd,
not.
your sisters aren't. They're not.
No.
So, but once James comes around, he's a believer, and then he's like the leader of the church from Jerusalem. So yeah, these guys are hoity-toity. Up
They're
there.
a big deal.
They're a big deal.
They're recognized.
What do the kids
they're
say
popular.
these days when they don't say big deal or hoity-toity? I know
No,
that.
they do not say hoity-toity. I'll tell you that.
I don't know anybody
Well,
who says hoity-toity
Yeah,
anymore.
nobody says that.
Anyways, so they show up. So here's Peter with these guys who came from out of town, right? And they arrived, and Peter began to draw back and separate himself from the Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. So he has all of this peer pressure from the big wigs. There's another try.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Keep
So
trying.
from these guys that are like up in the high Judaism coming to Christ realm, and then the Judaizer group, which is you got to obey the law before you can come to Jesus group. And so Peter's afraid. Like, what is he afraid of? And he begins to separate himself, say, "Oh no, I'm not living like a Gentile. That's not me anymore. I'm gonna go back to Judaism."
He's probably concerned with his hoity-toity reputation, right? Like I'm assuming, but this is my reputation, and I'm known as somebody, and these people look up to me, and again, these groups. Well, this group thinks that this is wrong, so I think there's that pull to please people and to keep your reputation and to be known as the good guy or whatever it is. And I think I want to assume that his intentions are good, right?
That Peter?
Yeah, that he's trying.
What's he trying to do?
To please people.
Well, it says there in verse 12, in the last part of the verse, that he withdrew and held himself aloof because he was fearful of the party of the circumcision. So it was the Judaizers. That's
the guys who are preaching the false gospel,
right?
And he's trying to please those guys.
Yes.
I'm gonna push back and go, I don't think he's trying to do something good there. I think he's more of afraid of man's opinion.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, none of us know Peter's heart, and we're not qualified to judge his motives or his intentions.
Well, we have a podcast, so I think we're qualified to do that, right?
Oh, are we?
Someone gave me a microphone,
Right?
so
We got a platform. That's how this is going.
That's another whole conversation for a special podcast.
Special bonus
A
episode.
bonus episode.
Oh, hey, if you didn't know, bonus episode did go out. I did do my job, got
Great
it
job,
done.
Scott.
Man, that was a chore and a half. But hopefully it's helpful. If you haven't checked that out,
We
check
can
it out.
speculate all day long about what is going on in Peter's heart and mind on this, but when it says he's fearing the party of the circumcision, at least one thing is he just doesn't want to deal with the hassle of their disapproval and their censorship and their, attempt to, as we say in our culture today, cancel out Peter. He just doesn't want to deal with that, and he just feels perhaps, like it's just an easier path, less resistance, just to pull back until those guys are gone, and then he can go back to what he knows to be right and true.
Yeah. Well, as you're speculating on Peter's heart, I think that's good. That's what I was trying to drive at, all joking aside, was if we can speculate a little bit of what's going on here, I think that'll help us give insight in our relationship following Jesus and how, just like Peter, who we've talked about like through the book of John, the courageous things, the bold things, but yet he's still human. And is he looking for man's approval? Is he afraid of the public opinion of himself?
Yes.
Does he just not want to deal with confrontation and conflict? Again, who he's hanging around with is influencing him more than he's influencing them. And that's why Paul jumps in and says, all right, I'm going to shut this whole thing down because let me influence all of you.
Right.
Todd, to your point, you're like, hey, who I'm hanging around
Who I'm hanging around for.
at work.
Do you have that buddy? If I walk up to Craig, it's my responsibility. If Craig's preaching something wrong, I got to go to Craig. Because if Craig's teaching something wrong and he's teaching all my friends and my buddies wrong, I have to go tell Craig, I'm sorry, Craig, you're wrong on this point, and we will have a discussion about it. Just like Paul does to Peter. Because Peter is the hoity-toity. Paul is...
I'm bringing hoity-toity back.
No,
Paul
you're
is,
not.
Let's not do that.
Paul is the bad guy, okay, that was totally bad, totally flipped by Jesus. Mm-hmm. Now he's the outsider, but he's willing to step up to Peter and say, "Hey, buddy, you're messing this up." You know.
Yeah, because Peter.
So sorry, Craig. Even though you're going into retirement, we're still going to watch you.
Okay. Well,
still
I
checking.
appreciate that. That's
we'll
where you're
still
coming
check,
from.
yeah.
I'm also relieved to say that I don't think you and I have ever had that conversation.
No, we haven't. We haven't. But especially the first 9 months to the first year that we were here, I was checking you out hard.
As you should.
How long you're married to Jackie. You've talked about her, and then you guys have 3 daughters.
Yep.
One of them's married.
One was married.
I was just going to try to make sure your family's known. Sometimes I feel like we have guests on, then we
Yes.
just get talking about all the other stuff. We don't get to know them as people.
See, and I have a whole nother background on my story there too, because Jackie's dad is a pastor.
Oh, okay.
So it's really weird because I dated one of my best friend's sister, and she was a PK, and that was 2 of my rules that I was never going to break.
And for those of you that don't know, a PK is a pastor's
kid.
Or perfect kid, whatever.
No,
One of the 2.
no, Scott, we know you.
Says Scott the PK.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it was really weird having your pastor as your father-in-law, and it still is. But one of the first things he ever
Is that how
told
Amy
us,
feels?
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. There's a lot.
But one of the first things he ever said is if you guys hear me say something wrong, you need to tell me. Mm-hmm. And, I would tell him. Most of the times he was still right, but we still had discussions.
Yeah.
And Todd, to your point, I remind people of this regularly. And if you're one of our listeners right now, I would just encourage you strongly to do what Todd's talking about. When you listen to somebody on a podcast or a pastor or a teacher, anybody, read a book. Do what they did in Acts 17:11. The listeners that were there in Berea listening to Paul, the scripture commends them for the simple fact that when they got done listening to Paul, they went and searched the scriptures every day to see whether those things were true. True. And it's not that they doubted Paul or disrespected Paul, but even Paul, as a teacher, could potentially be, off base. And so they had a responsibility. They knew they did, and they went to the scriptures diligently. I'd encourage you to do that.
Absolutely. You got to double check it. Paul himself says in the beginning of Galatians, I told you the real message. If you even hear a different one from me, like push
From
back
me,
on me,
yep.
say, no, Paul, you're saying something different now, remember? And you said we should call you on that because that's not the good news. Because popular opinion is this, only certain people have influence. And there's quote-unquote influencers now as like a job, and you're a social media influencer. Wrong. Every single person has influence, and leadership is influence. And that's what was the issue, was in verse 13, the other Jews joined Peter in his hypocrisy, saying the hypocrisy was like, hey, you grew up a Jew, great, that was great for them. Now we know that Christ is here, and so we can disengage from the Jewish laws. It was holy and righteous and good for a season, but it's done. Now we can live like Gentiles and be with Gentiles, and we're not, what's the opposite of holy? Would be unholy?
Yeah.
Like
That
defiled?
that works well.
All right.
Unholy.
I got real nervous about my
Unrighteous.
grammar right there. I don't know why.
Grammar was okay.
Okay, just
And
make sure.
don't forget, it's not just us. It's not just the humans on the earth. We are against an enemy. There is an enemy.
Right.
He is
In the spiritual realm.
fully acting against us. He is using everything that he has against us, and that's Satan, by the way. Okay?
We weren't talking about aliens.
We
or
weren't
other
talking about
planets.
aliens. We weren't
Okay,
talking. It's
just checking.
We
the
weren't talking about
spiritual
one of your
world.
in-laws.
Yeah, not my in-laws. I love my in-laws actually.
No, not your in-laws.
Oh.
I'm talking to our listeners.
Oh yeah.
But good way to cover the bases. Just in case,
Cover all the
in
bases.
case your parents are listening, their in-laws are
Yeah.
listening.
Love all the family.
Everybody's
Love all
great.
the family. Yeah.
Everybody's wonderful.
But don't forget that you do have an enemy out there, and it's not necessarily say Scott is the person that I'm arguing with. It's not Scott that is my enemy.
Right.
Scott might be influenced by somebody else, and he doesn't even know it yet. So,
Yeah.
not that Scott's a bad guy, but
So I'm just saying that Peter's influencing others and leading them down the wrong path, distorting the Gospels, distorting the good news. And so Paul's saying, hey, I got to, and he did it in front of everybody to Peter's face, which is the best way to, if you got a conflict with someone, don't talk behind their backs with other people, go straight to them. And with a group of people that he was influencing, say, hey, this is not okay. Why do you think keeping the law is going to make you right? If we jump down to the end of the chapter,
And
he's
go ahead.
talking all about that. Like, I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
he's just calling them back to the center of the gospel, the truth, that if Jesus is who he says he is, and he did what he said he was going to do, died for our sins, then that's it. It's case closed. If we're going to try to rebuild some sort of system where I'm going to be made right with God through my own system of law and regulation, Christianity and good works and good deeds, it's like, no. You know, it doesn't matter if I'm, quote unquote, a good person or a bad person. We all need Christ. We all need the righteousness that comes through Christ.
Yeah, and I think just to go back to kind of what we're talking about with that influence, and I the reason I'm defending Peter a little bit is this idea that, you know, he's not going full like, yeah, these guys are right, and I'm going to start preaching this message of what the Judaizers are preaching, but he's kind of losing his conviction there, what he knows is right, and that's what Paul calls him out for. Is he starts to withdraw from Gentiles. He starts to, I can't hang out with them because I don't know what this group's going to think of me. I think that goes back to your point a lot of times where we go, I can't be seen with them because what are my church friends going to think? Like, I can't. We talked about it a little bit a few weeks ago with Paul. Like, I had to go to Spokane. Big Paul is
our guest.
Our guest Paul,
Paul
who
MacArthur.
said, hey, you know, I'm a pastor and I was going to work on my sermons in Spokane and I would be at a bar, but I couldn't be at a bar in Elmira because
There wasn't a
these
bar
people
in
might.
Elmira,
There
for
wasn't a
one.
bar in Elmira.
But don't go to
But-
Greg
Minor
Cooley or
details.
Yeah, but these people are gonna look at me as a pastor and go, "You can't be in that space because you're a pastor, and that's wrong or that's bad." And
I'm always like, well, what are you doing in this space, buddy? As a Jesus follower, like, you shouldn't be here. Well, you're in here and you see me, so we're in here together.
sure, yeah. So
It's probably some of that pastor kid thing that's always like, oh, you're
the
a pastor.
rebellious part of that.
No,
is
no,
it-
no,
oh.
it's
you
the-
know PKs are the worst.
No, it's not that at all. It's the other people's regulations and reality of how I should live my life that was tried to force upon us. Like, oh, you're a pastor's kid, you can't do that. My kid could do that, but since you're a pastor's kid, you're held to a different standard, and I'm going to hold you to that. And our parents, my dad and mom did a great job. They're always like, basically, like, back off. We'll parent our own kids. Thanks for the help, but no help.
Yep, I did that publicly from the platform
Like-
more than once.
I've got that recently from people who have known me for my whole life.
Oh, for sure.
About a pastor kid comment about my kids. And it was the power of God at work in my life to not respond with anything
Physical abuse.
physical abuse and anything other than like love and holding of the tongue. Anyways,
Yeah.
go ahead.
You want to continue on that point?
You mean go for it. You jump in.
Well, I think we need to be real clear here about this, who's influencing who, bad company corrupts good morals. We're not wanting to withdraw from the world. We need to be in the world, but we
Yes.
need to be the one influencing the world, not the world influencing us. All that, it's a very important balance to maintain, a tension to be managed, as we say. And I think the real tipping point is, and we've touched on it now already several times, who's influencing who? So back to Paul, when he's in the bar preparing for his message. Is he influencing the people in the bar? Yeah, absolutely. It's a great story. And if you didn't listen to that particular podcast, what number is it, Scott?
2 ago.
Two
Not
podcasts
previous
ago.
episode, the one before that one.
Anyway,
You know what? I think today, Todd, we'll celebrate with you. I think today is episode 50. 50 sounds like a great number to just celebrate.
There you go.
Okay.
I think we're on episode 50, so I think it would have been 48.
Something like
Cool.
that.
All right, so
Keep
there you
going.
go. But
Wait,
anyway,
you
so-
guys aren't
so
as
in
excited
Paul's-
as
No.
I am, apparently, on
Nope.
that.
He's
I
in
think that's
mid-thought.
just a
Let's go.
number.
All right.
Remember, he's the
Man.
guy, you know, I
Yeah.
Love numbers.
stoplight
What
at
about
Uh-huh.
100? Will you
6:24.
get excited about 100?
Sure. We'll throw a
Okay.
party. We'll get
All
you a
right.
cake.
Yeah, it's
But so,
episode
bring
so
48.
Paul's the in his story, he's very consistently the influencer of the people around him. Now, if he is a different guy with a different background, and his story is different, he might find himself hanging out in those bars, being more influenced by the people there.
Like someone that struggled with alcoholism?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then, so I think that's where the tension is. And I
Yep.
made the point when Paul was on the podcast that I think the real message from his story is that he actually was following Jesus. And for some people, doing what Paul did, hanging out in those kinds of environments, is what Jesus would lead them to do. For other people, Jesus would specifically lead them not to be in those environments because they would be more vulnerable or susceptible. It's the old illustration, you know, somebody standing on a chair and somebody standing on the floor. What's easier, to pull the person down off the chair or pull the person on the floor up onto the chair? And
How big are the people?
Oh my
yeah,
That's where
My
I was going to
daughter's
go
as
though,
well.
Craig. As because again, Paul's reprimand and rebuke or conversation in this isn't. It isn't even really. It is what you're doing is wrong. But he's like, are you noticing the influence? Because now other people are looking at you and going, oh, Peter's withdrawing, so that must be the right thing to do. We must distance ourselves from these Gentiles too. Because if Peter's doing it, and he's a pillar of the church, which they just said, then we should do that too. And Paul goes, hold up, look at what you're doing. Look
He
at
says
the people.
even Barnabas got him.
Yeah.
Like got
Yeah.
influenced.
The Rock.
Yeah,
Even
the
though
guy
Peter
that-
is called the Rock, I think of Barnabas as the
Yeah,
Rock.
and like Paul and Barnabas are tight. And
Yep.
like, Peter, you're influencing Barnabas.
Look at what you're doing. Look at the division you're causing between even people who are trying to follow Christ. And so I think that's again for me in the message that we're at. Like, look behind you and look at how you're influencing people. So it's not only how are you being influenced, right? But like, what is what you're doing? What message are you sending? How are you influencing people? And he's going, hold up, you're doing the whole thing that I'm fighting against right now, and I'm working hard because I have this. He believed, rightfully so, that he had a message from God himself to fulfill a goal. And he goes, Peter, you are hurting that. You are against that in me.
Yeah.
And look at what you're doing. And like he had to pause and go, oh yeah, you're right. I'm
Because
influencing.
everybody has influence. It's not a question of am I or am I not influencing. It's like it's what you're saying. How am I influencing people? Because I am, and everyone listening has influence with
Right.
people around them.
The
And
worst is when your children correct you. Or if you've raised them right and suddenly you say or do something and they go, Dad, you're not supposed to do that. And I'm like, really? I raised you too well and now you're making me do things right.
Right.
Which is the way you want it to be.
Yeah. Which
So
and you and Jackie have done a great job with your girls, and
Oh,
they're
I think
following
that's-
Jesus.
I
and-
think those are if I just take that, I take my 3 girls as probably my 3 biggest things that I've ever done. But I can only take less than 50% credit because my wife probably raised them better than I did.
she's pretty phenomenal.
She is pretty awesome. So that's probably my number 1.
And, Todd, I think you were spot on with this as far as the influence thing is Jesus showed up with those people in those situations, having been fueled up with his personal relationship with the Father, with his close friends who were encouraging one another. And then he showed up with the purpose and the mission, like Paul did at the bar, right? He's mission to, okay, God, how do you want to use me today? Not like, ooh, what's the best thing on tap today? And showing up with a different purpose, but also with full of the Spirit in order to influence others. And, it'd be a different thing if we just lived at the bar. And
Yeah,
we
but
derived our energy and our source of life from the bar itself, environment.
But I love that, and I want to pause a little bit because that can seem too overwhelming. Because
Which part?
I'll get there.
Okay.
What I think Paul MacArthur, Pastor Paul, was doing was while I'm going, it's missional and purposeful.
Yes.
Right? Because it's harder to think. I go, okay, I'm in the parking lot. What's my mission inside this bar? He was literally going there just to work on his message.
Yep.
He was going in life, and
Yeah.
he goes, as I'm going, this is missional. So I think I totally agree with what you
But
say.
he's
But I think
open to have those conversations.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Not like, hey, I can't talk. I got a
for
thing
sure.
I'm doing here.
But what I think people can hear in that is like, it's too high a bar. Like I gotta think through
high
and
a
work
bar?
too high. See, too high of a goal to like. Okay, I gotta go into this bar with a mission to. Okay, I'm gonna talk to 3 people, and because Jesus he was just going. I'm on mission in life, And that's going to take me to the golf course. That's going to take me to working at a coffee shop. But while I'm there, I'm not being just distracted by my going. That's all I'm doing is I'm living missionally.
And
Yeah,
a big
and just
part of
have an
his motive-
openness is all I'm saying.
Yep, I know.
Not trying to
I
manufacture
didn't disagree with you. I was
Yeah.
just trying to say,
Yep.
Yeah.
I think people can hear that it's like, ooh, I got to have this, like, I have to think through a big deal mission purpose of why I walked into Walmart or Target or Fred Meyer.
Always leave the light on.
There you go.
Tom Bodette,
There you go.
Motel 6.
Wherever you
Yep.
go, leave the light on.
While I'm
I'm
doing
going.
this, so he was shining a light in a bar, in a Walmart, in a Fred Meyer. I think of Cindy. Every time I walk into Fred Meyer, I'm like, I'm going to see Cindy Langhans because she's in here.
Cindy has
She
a Fred
actually-
Meyer ministry.
She has a room in the back. She gets
Yeah.
it's a cot. She actually
I
lives there.
don't shop at Fred Meyer very often, but I'm like, most of the time I do, she's there.
She's there.
And she's talking to everyone and loving people and just being nice. And
She'll take 10 minutes or 15 minutes worth of shopping and turn it into an hour
I was going to say,
experience.
it's 2
And
hours.
she always says, when I show up, those people, they always want to chat. I'm like, Mom, no, you're those people.
You're those people.
But she's leaving the light on in a simple way. She's friendly and loving and caring to people in Fred Meyer.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
she gets a
Exactly.
lot of ministry done in aisle 17 through, whatever, frozen food section.
Yeah.
But see, that's the image that you have, that you grew up with. You lived with that. You saw that day after day after day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we need to be for our kids, for our friends.
Yeah.
Be that. I don't like to use your wife as an example, but leave the light on. Have people see you.
Yep.
Yep.
And as we live that way, that's a lighter, easier way if we aren't all tangled up with all of this law and regulation and the people who are saying circumcision, which meant you had to follow the whole law. Circumcision was like the starting point that encompassed everything. And so that's why I started the podcast with, hey, the way to follow Jesus is light and it's not burdensome. His yoke's not heavy. And it's a lot of this living by the power of Spirit is just this openness. So if someone's running by and shows up to your church and wants to talk
Yep.
about Jesus, be open to talk about Jesus.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't manufacture that. I can't go run out to the street and come in, the Spirit's talking to you. But my responsibility is to respond and be open to that, whether it's at Fred Meyer, whether it's with my neighbor, whether it's with old ladies in nightgowns, or whatever is going on in our lives, that we would just live more in tune with what God is doing in the moment and respond to that.
Yeah, and I think it goes all the way full circle back to Todd, your story early in life. And it's like, yeah, I wasn't doing anything quote unquote special. I was just letting my light shine. I was just being who I knew Jesus called me to, and it led me to have people ask questions because they saw it. It led to people talk to me about life and wanting to know, why do you got that thing? And I wasn't, it wasn't this big aspirational mission to reach every person in my school, but I'm going to do today what God's called me to do, and I'm going to be open to that whisper or that shout for that day and do what God's called me to and watch what he's able to do while I'm on mission in my everyday life doing whatever it is that I'm doing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed in Paul's admonition in 1 Corinthians 15 about the resurrection and how he defended the truth of the resurrection. The tomb is empty, guys, and if we start saying it's not, we're not representing Christ well, we're not representing our faith well. As a matter of fact, we're wasting our time. We're of all people most to be pitied because we've been deceived. If there is no resurrection, we're all dead in the water kind of thing. So he's passionate there, and he's passionate similarly here with regard to grace versus the law. And I think that just goes to, he wants Jesus to be presented in an irresistible way. He wants Jesus to be presented accurately and for people to understand clearly what it is that Jesus is inviting them into. And he's inviting them into a relationship with him that is liberating, that is full of grace and mercy, that is not about religion, it's not about law, and it is based on the historical fact of the empty tomb. And Paul's just gonna be passionate all the way through his life, right up to the time of his death. He's just gonna be adamant about this, like he is in Galatians, because he doesn't want distorted versions of who Jesus is being presented to people, because he cares about people.
Yeah.
He wants his friends, he wants the people that he's traveling to cities to meet, to see Jesus for who he really is and who he wants to be in their life.
And that's what we'll jump into as we continue on in this conversation about what it means to find and follow Jesus. And so I encourage you to read through the rest of Galatians as we are going to be really diving into this. Paul, next 2 chapters, really fleshes this out. Todd, thanks for being on the show today. We hope you come back. it wasn't as disruptive, I think, as you wanted it to be. So I think
I
you,
dial it down.
You
I
dialed it down. We
Did
appreciate
you
that.
hold back a little
I
bit?
did.
It was a good
little bit.
first date. You come back, we could do it again.
I dipped the toes.
Because you did before we got recording. You're like, is there anything off limits? And I was like, whoa, what do you want to talk about, man? So maybe we'll get to some off limits things
do come
next
back.
time. We appreciate you taking on your day off, taking some time to come in. If you're not subscribed, and check out that bonus episode that dropped 2 days ago. And maybe we'll have some more bonus content coming up. But thanks for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.